Hello, and thanks for listening to the Conscious Diva podcast. I'm Tatiana, and joining me today is horse listener Sandra Wallin. Now, most of us think of horses as herd animals, but have you ever considered horses as a healing path to transformation? Sandra is a sought-after speaker, educator, psychotherapist, and horse listener. She teaches equine-guided wellness worldwide. Her co-collaborator, Kim McElroy, is an award-winning equine artist. And in this episode, she shares her magical new oracle deck called the Council of Horses. I hope this episode opens you up to tapping into the earthly and spiritual wisdom of horses. Let's chat about your beautiful oracle deck, the Council of Horses. And here it is. Thank you. And thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited for this conversation because I love horses so much.
It's a pleasure. It's an honor, and it's wonderful to meet a horse sister that has so much, has been infused already by the wonder and magic of horses before we even started to talk. So I'm really excited to be here with you. Thank you.
You're welcome. So let's tell listeners a little bit about you first. What do you do? Because you're an equine therapist in the sort of most simplest way to explain that.
I think one of the things that horses teach us, amongst many of the things, is to always listen to our heart and follow our heart. So I've always done that in terms of what my vocation is. You know, David White has this beautiful way of talking about work as the place where our soul or our spirit meets the world. And for me, my work has always been that. And very often my work has been in the company of horses, and certainly always inspired by horses. And who I am, I believe, has been cultured and encultured by the presence of horses in my life from when I was really little through today. So I do equine guided. I love using the word guide. There's lots of acronyms for it out in the world, but for me, horses have always been guides and mentors and teachers and friends and healers. And so the word guide is important in that acronym for me. And I teach people how to work in the company of horses in this field. But also, I think my favorite, well, maybe two things. It's impossible to narrow it down, but it started for me when I was a school teacher and school counselor, bringing children out to work with the horses, the children that were often marginalized or forgotten about or maybe misunderstood and didn't quite necessarily have a way of standing in their own grace, in their own power, and in their own wisdom, really. And the horses infuse their self-esteem, their perspectives, their resilience, their capacity to learn and integrate what it is that they've learned. So that part of the work that I do is foundational. And then integrating the expressive arts and therapies, because I'm an art therapist as well. So bringing those pieces, and the children taught me that way back in the beginning. They weren't interested in talk therapy, and realistically, not many of us are. And so to be able to take the lessons that they receive from the horses and work through the arts and really creating a whole brain state and environment, which is a super learning state, in the company of the horses, and then to be able to go back into family, into school system, and be able to be more resilient, to be more focused, to be more balanced and grounded across the board when they were able to integrate what the horses taught through the arts. So the art and the horses have always been a natural integrative space and place. And so my favorite thing probably is to be able to work with transformation in the company of horses, also bringing in the beauty of art.
I can speak from firsthand experience with, as a child, when I was a young person, I started riding when I was 4. I was first introduced to horses when I was 4, and I immediately took very naturally to riding, and very quickly moved through riding, and even I would get thrown off and I would get right back on and run to the pony and want to get back on. And then when I was 13, my dad bought me my first full-size horse, a 15-hand horse for my birthday.
Oh yeah.
And I was just so in love with him. And over the years, my teenage years from 13 to say 18, 19, a lot of things shifted in my family. My parents got divorced. There was a lot of emotional stuff. I was, really not doing well at school. And what I can reflect back on, a lot of things, there's so much truth in what you said, and I experienced a lot of that firsthand. I went to the stables every single day after school.
Yes.
I showed on weekends. I was really fortunate to have this experience. At that time, I didn't realize. But I knew that my relationship, my friendship and my bond with my horse Quest was really special. And all my friends to this day, some of my closest girlfriends are from that time.
Of
That
course.
we all are from the stables. We all had, our horse or horses, and we really bonded with that over that relationship and that connection. And it's amazing. And I learned so much. My horse taught me that I could do things on my own, that I was strong, that he taught me how to work, with others and how to trust, and that things were going to be okay, and that I was loved. And it was really beautiful. Anyway, it was gonna make me cry.
Oh well, please do, because that's one of the things that happens, and it's not an uncommon story. Although, would it be amazing if it were more common in the fact that I think there's a saying about if girls can have a horse in their life, and maybe this also extends to young men, but then the need for quote unquote the therapist is not there, that our therapists, our friends, they eat grass, and if we can just be out in nature's classroom with these divine guides and teachers and friends, as you said, it's incredible what it can do. And the bonds, like you're saying, with those other girls that shared that common language and those experiences last lifetimes.
They really do. So, okay, so let's talk about then the deck. How did this come about? I know you're an author, you have two other books you've written, and the beautiful artwork by Kim is just so stunning. In fact, some of them look so lifelike, don't they?
Incredible.
Right? Is
They
that a
are.
painting behind you by Kim?
This one is actually one that I did, and it's also in the
That's in the
deck.
deck. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's Enbar, and he's my horse Chiron was the muse for this painting, and he's a fairy horse. It moves in between the veils, if we want to talk about it in that world, but also he's very much a kind of a shapeshifter kind of horse, very mercurial, very quick intellect, and very brilliant and curious. So he's in the deck, which is a real joy. He's also one of the horses that Kim put into Ex Tenebris Lux. You'll see there's a herd of horses, which is about from the darkness comes the light, and how all gray, or what many people call white horses, are actually gray horses, and they all are born black, and how they turn and gray out over the years. And people think it's because they're becoming older, and that's certainly part of it. But they start to change quite quickly. So the art is Kim certainly did the lion's share of the art, and I did the lion's share of the writing, and the merging of the two created this beautiful. Well, I'm biased, so this beautiful collaboration of bringing language into the teachings of horses. And I think what we're super excited about is that it's told from the perspective or through the voice of the horse. So each card that anyone will draw starts with the story of that horse, telling you about who they are and a bit of their history. And there are certainly mythological and legendary horses, the horses of history and story. And then there's the horses that we've shared our lives with as well. And the horses like you were just describing, Quest, would very much be a member of this council. All horses are members of the council, but of course we ran out of time and space and room. So it was the first envisionage of this, that the 40 horses that came into this herd. As a therapist and teacher, I work with decks all the time, and the idea that our subconscious mind when we look at the programming and beliefs we have in the subconscious mind, and I know that you've interviewed Lynn McTaggart, who's absolutely incredible. So this idea of the field and that everything is around us, everything is a reflection of this inner reality. What are we putting out there is reflecting back to us. The horses are like that. If we think about an equine guided session, we might go out to the farm or the ranch or a pasture, and then we look out, we stand present and we look out and make an invitation in a way. It's important for me that it's a mutual choosing, and the horses always do that anyway. But then very often one horse will, prick up his ears or come to the fence. And so that's kind of what's happening when we're working with this wisdom card deck is it's like imagine coming to the field or the fence line and putting out a prayer or a question or a request for company or guidance. And then the card you draw is going to be the horse that approaches you. So being able to work with it in a really practical way, but also in this really, for other people, it would be a deeply spiritual relationship and conversation as well.
I love that. And what about for people who, because there's many people who've never interacted with horses, and some people are even afraid of them because they're so big.
They
I've
are.
I've met a lot of people in my life who are like, oh, horses. Even my husband is like, oh, I don't know about horses. And I'm like, you're missing out. I I always find I describe horses a lot like cats in terms of their personalities, the way a cat sort of decides whether it wants to come near you. If you're a human, it wishes to sort of, engage with. And then when it does decide, its behavior is very interesting when it first comes over, right? So I use that analogy with cats often for people who are not sure of horses. So how do you do that? What do you say?
I think the archetype of horses, regardless of whether we've spent time with them or whether we maybe admire them from afar or find them these big, majestic, and sometimes even frightening creatures because of the horsepower, because of their size. I think the deck kind of regulates and normalizes that and allows us to bring the mystery and the magic and the beauty without necessarily the proximity, if that's something that people feel nervous about. And yet I think there's something about horses that maybe it's our shared evolutionary path, maybe it's the cultural significance when you also look back through different peoples and their relationship with horses. I think horses and humans have been sharing a conversation for millennia, and Kim and I would both believe even uh, out into the ethers beyond that. So they've been the most, when you look at ancient cave drawings, they're the most painted animal that has ever shown up. There's a term called hippomancy, which is referenced in the book,
Mhm.
and which is horses being worked with, and I don't like the word used, but used as in a divinatory process, very often the white horses, but they would pay attention to how a horse would move or walk or engage in a herd, or how it would step across certain sticks that would be laid out to influence their decisions about whether they would plant a crop or whether it was an auspicious marriage that was up and coming. And so the idea of horses being part of our stories, our cultures, our thoughts, our beliefs, just I can't imagine there was a time where we were separate, and that's what the origin story of the deck is all about, is the agreement, the sacred contract, perhaps, that horses and humanity made when we came here to be able to bring these enlightened states of being. So regardless of whether someone has shared time with horses or is even curious about horses, the wisdom here is timeless. And I think that, and it's so, it can be very, very user friendly and nourishing. And then just like horses can as well, it can be like a little nudge or a little nicker, and sometimes a little kick, metaphorically, a little kick in the pants, like, hey, you've gotten off track and now it's time to maybe head back this way. I think we're really excited about that part in terms of the guidance in the deck, is how it can be very applicable to really anybody at any stage in their life, regardless of what it is they're dreaming forward or dreaming into being.
I can relate to so much of that. I love it. When I was reading through the booklet and then pulling the cards, I wondered quite often, were you channeling? You obviously were channeling this information. The answer
Well,
is yes.
I think
But I mean, where, so did the phrase Council of Horses come to you? Was it told to you? Some of the horses in here, like Grace was your horse. And I pulled her
really
earlier on. I also pulled Dharma, who was also belonged
James
to
Force.
Linda,
Yeah.
who wrote the forward. That actually made me really cry, that story. It was so emotional. I was so like, oh. So we'll talk more about the horses in a minute. But
Okay.
tell me, how did you come to get into that state? Were you in meditation? Was it out in the field with your hands on Chiron? I'm assuming Chiron's still with you.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And so I was wondering about all of that process because some of the horses in here, the cards are quite shamanic. They're really it's a healing deck. I just want to be clear. This is an oracle deck. It's a healing, right? Where you were communing with the power of the energy of horses to guide us fit on a transformational path.
It's all of those things, actually. So uh, it's interesting that you use the word channel because that's something that someone asked me when I was just away, and I tend to think about it. I wouldn't necessarily, maybe because I'm not quite whole brain to that idea, that word yet, but being in conversation with the horse, and then very often what it is, I'm maybe like a translator, and the information comes through. And sometimes people will say, "Well, could you say that again?" It's like, no, I can't say it again because I didn't say it in the first place.
Yes,
If
it's
that
them
makes
speaking
sense.
through you. Yeah, you're
And then
channeling.
back to the Lynn McTaggart piece about just the information is in the field. So just in entering into a quantum connection with the frequency or the stories of that horse and really just taking dictation in terms of, and sometimes I would just talk and Kim would write down what I was saying, and other times I would be working alone and would just do that in a different kind of way and would just write what would be coming through or speak into what would be coming through. Sometimes it would happen right here, literally in this chair, and other times it would be out. I have a out in the pasture here with the horses. I made a little mini Stonehenge, so there's this circle of large stones that I would very often go sit on, and I designed them intentionally that they were comfortable to sit on. They'd be like chair heights so that when I have workshops people can sit in this circle as well, and very often the horses will come into that circle. It's
Mm,
like a portal,
yeah,
really, and with
you're
all the
so right.
energy and things that have happened around out there, all the healing work that's happened there. So being able to tune in, but sometimes it's literally in the everyday mundaneness of picking up the manure. I would just get downloads and then I'd come in and write them down. So I think that there's a really beautiful story too, though, about because I was just back in Hawaii, our beautiful agent had been sharing the Council of Horses forward with all the amazing publishers, all the publishing houses that were out there, and they were all very kind, but none of them said, yes, we would love to publish. It was like, no, 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 no. And it had been quite a while.
I know that story.
You can have empathy then and sympathy for what it was, what the feeling was like. And we were in Hawaii with my family. And I was out swimming. We were there in February, so it was the time when all the humpback whales were there. And when you put your head under the water, you could hear the songs of the humpbacks, and it's just such a magical time. I really have a thing for whales, and so I was just floating on the water and listening to the songs, and I don't know, I got this little kind of tickle on the shoulder saying, "Just ask." So when I got out of the water, I just put a prayer out to the whales, and I said, "Oh, I don't know if you might have any influence. If it's meant to be let go of, this is a dream that's not meant to come true. It'd be really lovely to just know if I'm supposed to let it go, or if you have any influence, if you can pull any strings. It would be incredible if we could find the perfect stable for this deck, for these horses." And we truly believed that the horses were choreographing all of that anyway, not that it had anything to do with us. But when we got back to the place that we were staying, I opened my email and there was a note from our agent saying Inner Traditions and Barron Company would love to publish the Council of Horses.
Oh, I just got
Yeah, so I think the whales. So this when we were just back there, and the mamas are they're just starting to return to Maui. We saw a couple of reaches. I didn't hear the songs back yet, but I really made sure to just be out in the ocean and thank them for whatever they were doing behind the scenes.
That's a beautiful story. Well, I love that so much. And, because I pulled these two of the other cards. Let me,
Albarak and Akashqua.
yes,
Beautiful cards, beautiful stories.
have to do with dreams, right? And bringing one's
Names,
visions
the
in.
Akashic records, and then sending them out. And yeah, oh, yeah.
Really beautiful. And so those four actually I've had out for the last week, but this morning I just pulled out these two. I quickly skimmed over the section in the book and I found it so interesting because it's both water-based.
Oh, isn't that amazing? Oh, I love that the water horses are there.
Yeah, the
Healthy and
hippocampus and the camper.
hippocampus.
Mm-hmm.
And the hippocampus, we have horses in our
Right.
brain, right?
Yeah.
How cool is that?
Well, so you're friends with Bruce Lipton and you were just there with him. So what does he think about that?
I haven't shared the deck with Bruce, and I mean he knows that I've done it, but I haven't been I haven't had the cards with me when I've been with him. So that'll have to happen for another time. But I'm sure that he would be absolutely delighted, and we're going to be working on a little something together at some point as well. So I'm sure he'll get to see them. He loves he loves the idea of the creativity, and he's also very much feeling in the urgency. He's I say, well, you're zooming about. You're here. He says, yeah, Sandra, there's no time. There's no time. I have to share this with as many people as possible. I have to get people to realize that we really do need to be making decisions and choices and behaviors and practices because we're at this precipice, this cusp that he believes that we're at a turning point or a tipping point. And I think that the horses, depending on which card we're drawing, all of them are going to speak to this idea of, because sometimes when we think about how big things can be, it can feel daunting and overwhelming. But the idea that, and Lao Tzu talks about this, that the greatest change that we can give or bring into the world is that of our own transformation. And you referenced transformation earlier, that if we start close in, if we be the change, then I remember when my youngest daughter she was probably about 13 actually, and the school that I was working at was working with the Dalai Lama Center for Compassionate Learning here in Vancouver. And so we got to take a number of students to this big seminar. It was happening in the big hockey arena. So there's 30,000 people. And some of the students from the school got to go up and speak with the Dalai Lama when he was having a sort of a round table discussion with young people. And one of them asked him, what can I do to change the world? And you could just feel the audience touch our hearts. And he smiled in that beautiful way that he has. And he said, changing the world is too big a thing. He said, if you can hold positive thoughts in your mind and compassion in your heart, that is the only way you or anyone can change the world. And I always remember, and actually that's probably the first time I've said that without crying. It's always stuck with me because sometimes it can feel like such a big thing. And so if we just begin with ourselves, I think that's something all of us can do.
Now, I was a television producer for decades, but in the last 8 years, I've worked in the transformation space, and I don't describe my work as I don't say I'm a healer because I'm not healing the person, my client. I say I describe my work as transformational, and I work as a spiritual advisor, helping guide people back. And
Yes, the
for that,
guide.
guiding you back to the truth of who you are. And by doing so, you transform and dissolve back into that sweetness and find yourself. And then you're able to heal and do your good work in the world. And I think there's a lot of, well, I'm not going to go into my stuff, but that's what I loved about your cards. One of the things I loved about your cards, because when you do pull them, there's not just, as you said, the story about the horses, but that wonderful guidance for humanity as well. Right. So maybe just talk about a few of these. So let's start with Grace because she is your special horse. And that's a really beautiful picture.
it's really interesting timing. So I teach a process called psychological kinesiology.
Mhm.
And when I first met Bruce, Rob Williams, who's the originator of Psyche, and what Bruce used to finish writing the biology of belief, actually, they phoned and said, we're going to be in this town near where I am. Would I be interested in coming to help co-facilitate? And I said, I would be honored. I would love to. And when Rob and his wife came and stayed here at the house, we went riding. And that particular photograph is taken when Rob was, she's sort of anti, don't take my picture kind of. I don't know, she always would scowl when I want to take a picture. It was hard to find a good one of her. And Rob was riding, and I got out in front and I had a picture of him coming down with Grace, and Grace was just moving out. She was a Tennessee walker, and just the way she would move out in these big bold steps, and her mane was blowing this way. And so Rob was riding her in that photograph. And so that's the photograph that I sent to Kim to be able to, I felt like it really embodied her power, her strength, and her beauty. And very sadly, Rob just passed away in October. So that card has even more meaning now. And of course, Grace passed away 2.5 years ago. So the fact that they're both no longer with us, it's interesting to me that that card, it took me a long time. It was the last card that I wrote. I just couldn't bring myself to write it. The grief was so big, and still is, to be honest. It's just life without her is just not, it's just not the same.
I've got tissues here.
Yeah.
Really feel that.
And I feel very much when people read that card, they cry. It's about the algorithms of grief, but it's about a love story. It's about our love story. Now I'm going to cry. It's about our love story. And the things that she did, I called her the equine apothecary, because she could hold space for little ones that were on the spectrum or that had been bullied, and just that they had just shrunk. The world had just caused them to shrink. And she would just be with them and infuse them with the breath of life. She would also kind of drop a shoulder into a leader that thought they knew everything about leadership, and they actually didn't know, at least according to Grace, they didn't know a whole lot at all. And so she could be that kind of a abrupt teacher as well. But when she left, I just thought, like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Do I do this? Do I keep doing this work anymore? I just didn't. I felt lost. And I'm still coming back into those answers. But what's been beautiful for me, and I think for the world at large, is now she is reaching her kindness, her ferocious grace that she brings out into the world, her teachings, and the way that she does hold space for grief, like unlike any other horse I've ever seen. People will come and they would stand with her, and just whatever wound needed to be opened and activated, that they needed to find the light within for themselves, she would do that. And now she's doing that. People are drawing her out of the deck. And so in this way, she's reaching out even way beyond where she was reaching the people that were just coming here. And I feel so, I got goosebumps right now just thinking about it.
And how perfect is her name? Grace.
Yeah,
I mean,
Grace. And her registered name is actually a Grace Remembered.
oh my gosh.
Yeah, oh, I know. And actually, interestingly, I didn't know what to write, because there could be a whole deck of Grace. Grace could have her own deck and her own book. And so when it came time to just be present, and that meant I had to be present with her, and it was still so hard. And it just came very, very clear. She showed me the picture of her coming up the driveway when she first arrived, and I said, okay, this is what I need to write. And it was the most painful story to write, because it was the painful of her the story of her passing, the day that she passed, and holding her. And Chiron, interestingly enough, Chiron was like her son. He came when he was just a baby, and she kind of raised him, and she raised me, to be honest. She taught me. I always said that Kyron's teaching me a better horse, how to be a better horse, and Grace is teaching me how to be a better human. She taught me a lot about being a mom and doing it in a way that was graceful, and still is. She still is teaching me those things. So I'm touched that that you drew her, that she
Yeah, she spoke
standing
to me.
over our shoulders today.
She did. She totally spoke to me, and I didn't know anything about her, and I didn't know what to expect. Like this image shows her so powerful, as you described, like this, and really stunning, beautiful, beautiful horse. And I was really moved, both by her and Dharma's path when I pulled his card as well. But for listeners that might be thinking, oh my gosh, you guys, are you like, what? What are you really like it? Really, horses must do this to you? There is a movement, I feel like worldwide, that we're seeing a huge increase in people working with horses, in understanding the power of horses, the healing of equine therapy, and just I'm seeing it like I have a friend in Australia who's been to see a woman who, and he showed me the photos of that experience,
Yeah.
and it just looked incredible. He just stepped into the field and they walked around him, and each horse, there were several other people, humans in the arena, or actually it was in a paddock. And then they came and just walked around each person, and they sensed who needed whatever it was. And they were right on. Each person, each horse was guided by their own instincts to that person. Likewise, there's another woman in South Africa who's doing some amazing work, and she's
Mhm.
posting all of her images on Instagram with her healing. She has her healing bed, like a massage table out I'm sure you've probably seen her, and she has a bunch of different horses that come around while she's doing, I think she does Reiki. So while she's doing that, the horses come around and are also, in a way, performing Reiki. And it's really beautiful. And you also work with people, right? You also facilitate and train people to be able to work with horses. So I think this in itself is a testament to that shows the power, the healing power of horses. So I'd really love for you to talk more to this point, the healing power of horses, and what you do, how you work as a facilitator.
Thank you. Thank you. Gosh, I could talk for weeks and weeks about this subject. The very first, it's interesting because how things kind of come full circle. I'm not going to remember the year. It would have been early 2000s ish. I was speaking on just this topic, the healing power of horses, at a conference in Victoria, for a conference for physicians who practice integrative medicine, interestingly enough. David Suzuki was there, and Candace Pert was there, and Dr. Norm Shealy was there. This is amazing conglomerate of healing modalities for physicians, and how wonderful that horses were part of that conversation.
That's amazing, actually.
Dr. Alan Hamilton has written some amazing books about sort of being in the company of horses. Dr. Beverly Kane teaches medical students how bedside manner through her medicine and horsemanship program. So there's really, truly a foot in the very sort of more traditional allopathic approaches to well-being. Horses are standing there. And then we can also look at the spiritual enlightened, the frequencies. I mean, there was a beautiful group of sort of young millennial women that came out to be with the horses, and one of them, it turned out, had ovarian cancer. And Grace has worked with a number of people with cancer previously, and other stories around that, but this is the one that just popped into my head. And in that stone circle that I was just talking about, we put one of the sort of the zero gravity chairs out there. I just kind of had this picture that Grace needed to be with her, but she needed to have that part of her body sort of up, as opposed to standing vertically, more horizontally. And so all of the women, we were standing in circle in that space. And so at this point there were 4 horses, Zen and Tank and Chiron, and Tank's in the deck too, and Grace. And for sure, I kind of had an idea that Grace would come out, but usually the three other boys are busy and Curate and they have to all be involved. But they didn't. Tank and Zen stayed in the shelter, and Grace came out, and again, not a surprise, and she stood over this woman and just put her nose right on her tummy and was just standing there. It's just still and quiet and breathing. But then Chiron, who's normally, he doesn't stand still for more than a few seconds, hardly ever, he came and he stood beside Grace. And it was like he was supporting her or being there with her or being part of the combined collective experience. And he stood still. And this was probably a good half an hour that nobody moved. It was just breathing. So the boys were in the shelter. Chiron and Grace were out standing in the center of the stone circle. And the most beautiful, quiet, still, palpably shifting transformational experience. And this lovely woman was just laying there, and we had her all kind of, it was a bit of a coolish day, so we had her wrapped up in a snuggly. And to be able to watch the horses and watch Grace in particular just put her nose onto that person's body exactly where the cancer was, and to be able to just breathe there and give her remedy, here she is as the apothecary. And I had another friend who was diagnosed with testicular cancer who came out. And this goes back to your comment about people that are uncomfortable or unsure around horses. He was terrified of horses, but when he got the diagnosis, he phoned and said, I don't know why, Sandra, but I just know I'm supposed to come out and be with you and the horses. Is that okay? And at that time it was just Grace and Chiron. And I said, of course, come out. And again, unusual, Chiron stayed away, and we walked into the center of the paddock, and Grace just beeline, like she was on a mission, and she came right at us, and he was kind of going, well, she's coming, she's gonna stop, she's coming so fast. And I said, it's okay, I'm here with you, she'll stop. And she did, right in front of him, and again dropped her nose right to below his belt. And this time though, it was much more active. She would breathe in really big kind of breaths, and like a dragon, like she would just expel out the air. And she did that for about 5 or 10 minutes. And he's standing there going, I think she knows. I think she knows. And I said, I think she knows. And then after that time, she dropped her head to the ground and exhaled one final time, a really big blowout. And then she turned and walked away, like, okay, done. And 2 weeks later, he called, and the cancer was gone. Now, does that mean that there were not other variables at play? Well, there's no way of knowing, but I kind of think she had something to do with it.
And what about the woman that came to visit as well? How was
She's
her
doing
health?
well, but I didn't have the same kind of friendship and relationship with her to have that same side of follow-up. I know that she is doing well, but I don't have that 2-week time period where she went back for studies or for further tests and got that feedback.
And it reminds me so much of shamanism, the shamanic experience where the shaman blows through and is literally
Yes.
energetically inhaling the energy of the disease out
Yeah.
of the person's body, and then almost in a sense equalizing
Yeah.
or recalibrating the body, I should say. It's almost like that. And I know we have to we have to be careful. I mean, we're not making
We
claims
do.
as a healing
Yeah.
anybody,
Exactly.
but there's phenomena that for sure happens that we can't explain. That's very energetic, and the horses are totally these divine conduits. And you, as we said in the beginning, that on an emotional level can be experienced. They really
Oh,
have the capacity to open up your heart, right? And just and people, you have this beautiful story on your website of a boy, and I think it's great to share that, because when someone's autistic or isn't necessarily communicating in words, when they have this emotional experience that they're so moved and feeling so happy, they can produce, he's humming, right? He's like humming and he's making this wonderful sound. And you just know he is so happy. He's in his happy place right now. He doesn't have to say anything, doesn't
No
have to be
words.
expressed in words.
No.
You just know. And there's such love in that. It's so beautiful.
That story too is about Grace again. So that's her.
Her magic.
Interestingly enough, after she passed away, there was a lady that was coming out to do her practicum here as part of her graduative process, and she wanted to work with a group of young people that were on the spectrum. And so she had two moms come out that had, there were one mom had three children on the spectrum and one had one. So there were these four little ones. My husband said he was in the house and he saw one run by and then the mom run the mom run after. But it's beautiful safe space for them to actually run. They can run here. They can't do themselves any harm here, so there's this space which in and of itself was beautiful. But I was watching when one of the young men with the therapist and the mom went into the paddock, and normally that would be Grace there. And so I was watching and just curious about what would happen, because Chiron is not a beginner's horse at all. And there he was. The little one was, I made a huge sandbox, because as Grace got older, it was a soft place for her to sleep. And all the horses would inevitably sleep out there. So the little one went out into this big sandbox and he was playing in the sand, and Chiron was walking over, and I was there, I was close, I was just really paying attention, keeping everything safe. And he ever so tenderly did exactly what Grace would have done. He put his nose down onto this little one's head and just breathed. And the little one just went still after it, and there had been no stillness up until this point, and he was still. And then he reached up, and I'm going to cry again. He reached up and put his hand on Chiron's shoulder, and connection. This is connection. And Chiron was so patient, still, because he couldn't. If he had moved, he might have knocked him into the sand or anything like that. He just still. And they stood there in this beautiful, they were having this silent conversation. It was so incredible. And I thought, okay, he's been watching Grace all these years. And he too was her student. And now look he's become the teacher. It was just amazing. Amazing. Okay, tissues. Tissues all around.
Oh, beautiful. And in the wintertime here where I live, I volunteer as a ski instructor, and I do for a program that works with disabled children. And most of my students that come through have autism on some level on the spectrum. And it's taught me a lot about autistic children and autism. I didn't realize the spectrum was an oval and that there's varying degrees that go from the top, all the way around the oval. I just thought when I heard on the spectrum that you were highly functioning, and my gosh, was I so wrong.
Right.
So it's been amazing to learn so much about autism, but also from the children. It's been the most amazing experience. Like with the horse, with Chiron, when you see the kids, like they're in nature, they're skiing, they're on the snow, they're feeling the cold wind on their cheeks. And sometimes they don't want to put their helmet on, and there's a sensory issue, and so you just work with them. It's just like whatever it is that sometimes they're out there and you have to then and we're doing really big beginner stuff with some of the students, but there's some that have been doing it since they were really young, and now they're 16 and they've become pretty good, but you still need to guide them. You still need to make sure that they're we're staying safe,
Yeah.
but it's really there's the power of nature and the healing power of nature and the healing power of horses. I mean, there's something, it's just the most fulfilling and wonderful experience when you can have that with somebody who's not necessarily using words. It's a magical experience. There's nothing like it.
Nothing like it. And horses don't use words either. There's part of me that at one point when I first started seeing that conversation happening, and just seeing how the students were when they were with the horses and when they were outside, that I really, and again, this is just a juxtaposition, an idea, but it's like the students on the spectrum are more horse-like
Mm.
because the horses have that socio-sensual awareness where they're paying attention literally to every piece of information in their surroundings. And when we think about sometimes with the little ones, that's that over, it's too much. It's just because they're so highly sensitive to all. So what if they were more like horses and they were just more tuned into the subtle shifts of information, and because the noise can be overwhelming. So wouldn't it be incredible if we could be just like we're learning from horses and all that they have to show? What if we could then change? Well, what do people that are living with autism, how can they be our teachers? What is it that they can teach us about the world around us that we might not even be picking up on or perceiving?
On that point, why is it important for us to understand horse medicine?
Horses have a way of honing in on, even physiologically, where there's an interference pattern happening in the body. And this has been documented in research. So that perspective on horse medicine, we can think about it. Okay, so there's an identification or a diagnostic in a way, if we want to think about it from that perspective. But for me, horse medicine and the idea of that all horses are medicine horses, I think is where I'd like to dig a little bit more into around, and each coming back to that old beautiful term about apothecaries, and how I always thought of Grace as an equine apothecary, and that's going to be the title of the book that I write for her.
Mm.
It's about how horses are so perfectly adaptable and flexible and shape-shifting in a way that they can show up and present for each person the exact remedy, whether the remedy is energetic, whether it's breath, whether it's experiential, whether it's practical, whether it's mythological. They can bring to the forefront of our questions, or even maybe underneath a consciousness where we don't even yet have a question formed. They can interface with this part of who we are and be able to take us to the edge of places where we actually do need to move into and move to be able to transform or accelerate or actualize, but also to be able to stand so serenely and so steadfastly and congruently in present time with something that we might need to stay with as opposed to rush through. Or the human condition in modern times seems to be get on with it, move on with it, not to be able to be present. And I was just listening to a lecture by John Moriarty, who's this amazing Irish sort of poet and storyteller, and he was talking about his relationship with the land. And I thought, well, that's medicine, and that's what horse medicine is. And he would say, when we transition from a place of being thinking about, and he was talking about the mountains outside of his window, so I'm now thinking about the horses outside of my window. When I move from no longer thinking about horses, but instead think with them, and instead of dreaming about horses, but now dreaming with them, I think that is a profound remedy or antidote, if you want, for the malaise of modern times and culture, which is so much about being out of connection with what is and who we are, and so much also about that quick fix. I don't want to be gotten a hold of, and I don't want to be doing it in this way, although I know that this is a new language that we all speak. But I think I'm going to default into the language of nature and the language of horses, which is, so it doesn't require this, it just requires present. And maybe this even ties into, I know we were talking a little bit too about listening and whispering and speaking and moving and engaging in language, or deeper than language goes, with horses as well, which in and of itself I think is also another form of medicine, to be able to articulate who we are and what it is that we're wanting to dream into being in a language that goes deeper than words. So the idea of horses, that the medicine horses of the First Nations people, to be able to look at, even in ancient times too, the idea of the hippomancy, which we've spoken about, where horses are foretelling kind of the futures of a crop cycle or of a marriage. But to be able to now stand in the company of horses with a different kind of proclamation and declaration around our wellness. And wouldn't it be incredible, even if we just spent minutes a day being in a conversation with the land or even with each other about, how can I be malleable to the dream of this mountain or to the wishes of this horse, as opposed to how do you need to bend? How do I need to bend or move you so that you fit me?
And it's in this silent understanding, that really leads me to my other question on what is the difference between horse whispering and horse listening? And I think everybody that's interacted and spent a lot of time with horses knows what that listening, that innate listening feels like, because we're not necessarily hearing the way they're moving or the whinnying or their own sounds that they're making, but it's a feeling that you tune into. Just like if you have a dog or a cat, any pet, any animal that you have a relationship with, a bond with, you can feel that emotion. The horses very much feel us. And I'm sure you agree, but
So I think very often the whispering, we tend to think of it as a one-way thing. I think a one-way street. I think what would be categorized as true horse whisperers, or who would be, are the people that speak horse. And again, that it's not a verbal language, although we will articulate it and translate it into verbal so that other humans can understand what it is that we're translating or saying. But to be able to speak the language of energy, of nuance, of body language, of herd dynamics, of, the idea that in the quantum realm, there's so much information in the field, in the gap, in the space between us. If you watch as a herd of horses moves, there's constant conversations that are happening in that space. And so I think horse whisperers are that rare breed of people that know how to listen to, speak, converse in the language of horses. So in those frequencies, in those shades, in those hues that other people don't necessarily see. Maybe we see the world more as black and white, but a horse whisperer would have available to them this rich palette of colors through which they engage with horses. I think that that's something that a lot of these people that are really in the deep conversations with whispering or with horses are the ones that very often we don't even know about or hear about, because they just do it in a way that's so elegant, but
it's subtle, right? It's so subtle. You see them come up, and once they've established a connection, a relationship with that particular horse, when they're able to place their hands on the horses, when the horse allows them, gives them permission,
Yes.
they then place their hands over the nostrils, the giant nostrils, and almost breathe into the nostrils. And they're observing the way their ears are moving, and they're then given permission the horse will lower its head and give the person permission to feel the ears, or come to the rump and feel their rump and their tail and all these other things. So it's quite a magical process, actually, when you see a horse whisperer in action and really moving through that. But I think what you do as a horse listener is really incredible, because it's another layer of that. I think you're adding I think you by default you're a horse whisperer, and that's not what you actively do, but there's a next deeper layer of this incredible listening that just permeates. And the horse you've already established that bond, you already have the trust, so your horses that you work with are able to come to feel that and commune with you, and to support the other people that are seeking therapy and your healing services. It's quite a beautiful thing.
It's a reciprocity, is a sacred reciprocity.
Let's pull a card. Let's see what the what
Do you want to pull a
wisdom.
card, or do you want me to pull a card? And shall we do it for everyone that's listening? Because I
Let's do
think
it for everyone that's listening. Well, why don't you do it?
what can be really fun is that we can approach a wisdom card deck like this and just say, okay, what am I meant to be learning today? So when we draw a card like that, generally speaking, which is very often how I do it, what do I most need? What's the priority for me to be aware of today? So I'm going to fan out the cards, and I'm just going to set that intention that we draw a card. Oh, Rain Dancer just popped out. So this card is called Rain Dancer. And I loved writing this because, in a way, this is kind of living here in Vancouver. We get a lot of rain, and I like the gray, and I like the rain. And if it's sunny and bright for too long, I get a little cranky. It's like, bring on the rain, bring on the rain. So let's look and see what Rain Dancer has to say. And one of the things that I love about the stick too, and I've been saying that over and over because there's so many things I love about it. It was important for us that for people that do share their lives with horses, sometimes to be able to draw a card for our horses as well. So it can help us understand perhaps a little bit about what that horse might need or why that horse is behaving the way that they're behaving. So this card, so this is for all of us, everybody. This is for the entire herd that's listening right now, and it's about horsing around. And it's the message for humankind is, if play is the work of children, then get to work. Yeah, okay? Get to work. And for horses, it's time to let loose just for the fun of it. So this horse kind of reminds me a little bit of Chiron. And he's very, very playful. And when the winds of change start to blow and the rain starts to come through. So the idea of dance as if no one's watching, that old saying, is kind of like this. And it's a reminder. I have to share this part because I think it's for some of the listeners, this might resonate. It says, do you look at the rain and frown, seeing any rainstorm, emotional or otherwise, as something to get out of, or preferably to never get into? In the day-to-day living known as adulthood, it can be easy to forget that life was and is meant to be enjoyed. Waking up in the morning can feel like a chore when the only goal is to get through one more day, and challenges can feel like burdens rather than opportunities. When your eyes focus solely on the grown-up world, you may miss the magic around you and the invitation to come outside and play. And that's why Rain Dancer is dancing into our lives right now. She's inviting us, or he's inviting us, to unbridle, right? To unbridle our spirit and to revel in the rain. And our adult tendency can be stay in the dry, covered barn, not wanting to get our fancy jodhpurs wet, or worse, worry that someone might be watching through their play is uncivilized lens. But the child in us knows it's the place to be, out in the field, horsing around with me. I think that that's just an incredible invitation for everyone for today, regardless of where we live in the world, to just go outside and kick up our heels a little bit, have some fun.
That's beautiful. Perfect. That's a very easy bit of guidance, right?
Yeah.
For most people. Well, some people might be a struggle, but it's beautiful guidance. There's an open invitation to be
An
silly.
open invitation.
Where can we get your cards?
It's so exciting that they are everywhere. So all of the normal online booksellers and publishing houses that you can find, like Barnes and Noble and Simon and Schuster, and people order a lot from the Amazon delivery process. And still, I love going into bookstores, and our local booksellers, they need our support. They really, really do. If we want them to be there, we need to go in and support them. And that would be an opportunity to be able to purchase it from there. And then, of course, all of the online options are available as well.
Well, tell us your website.
Oh, my website is Chiron's Way, or sandrawallin.com as well. It'll take you to the same place.
Thank you so much. This was such a beautiful conversation, and that was a really great way to end. Your work in the world is amazing and well done, and it just
Thank you.
so beautiful. People should go definitely check out your website, chironsway.com. and Sandra Wallin, and the artwork by McElroy, and this beautiful story inside the forward. It was so gorgeous, and I just love it. Beautiful. So thank you
Thank you,
very much.
Tatiana. It's an honor to meet you, a joy to have this conversation together with the horses dancing around us.